An influential American tech mogul hired a caregiver for his autistic daughter, but the hidden cameras he installed revealed something he never could have anticipated. He was one of Silicon Valley's titans, a self-made billionaire. Julian Vance was known for architecting world-changing software, designing breathtaking minimalist estates, and always being in control of his emotions. But not one of his successes had prepared him for fatherhood, especially when his only child, Lily, was diagnosed with severe autism following the sudden death of her mother. The color drained from the little girl's world. The words stopped, the laughter vanished, and every expert failed to reach her, until a woman arrived who changed everything. She wasn't a licensed therapist. She had no formal training or academic degrees. All she carried was a heartfelt letter of recommendation from a small community center in rural Appalachia and a faded photograph of a child in her wallet. The billionaire hired her not out of trust, but out of pure, unadulterated desperation. Yet, there was something different about her. Slowly, imperceptibly, Lily began to smile, then hum a new tune, until one day, she started speaking words no one had ever taught her. Julian, a man naturally suspicious and accustomed to control, had his entire Atherton mansion wired with microcameras. He had to understand what was happening behind closed doors. What he discovered didn't just change how he saw his daughter. It brought the stoic billionaire to his knees. It unmade him. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, we can share more inspiring stories just like this one with you. Julian Vance built his empire from a garage in Palo Alto. He went from coding in a cramped room to owning a portfolio of tech companies and architectural marvels from the California coast to the Hamptons. People respected him. Markets moved when he spoke. But inside his sprawling, glass-walled estate, there was one thing he couldn't control: the crushing silence of his own child. Lily was 7 years old. She hadn't spoken a single word since her mother died in a horrific car accident on the Pacific Coast Highway 2 years ago. After the funeral, she simply shut down. She made no eye contact. She didn't laugh or respond. It was as if she had retreated into a world no one else could reach. She spent her days in her room, rocking gently, humming a low, repetitive melody, and recoiling from loud noises as if they were explosions. The doctors at Stanford called it trauma-induced regressive autism. Therapists from Johns Hopkins said it was a profound retreat caused by grief. Julian, a man used to solving multi-billion-dollar problems, was powerless. He had summoned the best child psychologists from across the country, even built an entire wing of his mansion into a therapeutic oasis, complete with interactive light walls, calming soundscapes, and state-of-the-art sensory programs. Nothing worked, until Elara arrived. She wasn't connected to any high-profile agency. Her resume was barely a single page. No advanced education, no prestigious qualifications, just a serene smile in her passport photo and that letter of recommendation from a small-town community center in Kentucky. She had spent years caring for children with special needs in underserved communities and had helped raise her 6 younger siblings after their parents passed away. That was her entire background. At first, Julian refused to even meet her, but it was his sister, Victoria, who had found Elara on an obscure online forum for caregivers and pleaded with him to give her just 1 week. Not to fix Lily, Victoria had said, but just to be with her. No structured therapy, no pressure. Exhausted and out of options, Julian agreed. When Elara first arrived at the sprawling Vance estate, she wore a simple cotton dress and carried a canvas bag filled with what looked like whittled wooden animals and hand-stitched dolls. She nodded politely and spoke softly. "I'm not a miracle worker, Mr. Vance. I just listen." That line stuck with Julian. The first day, Lily didn't respond, nor the second. Elara never forced an interaction. She would just sit quietly on the floor, humming old folk songs under her breath. Occasionally, she would roll a colorful, handcrafted wooden ball in Lily's direction. There was no reaction, but Elara persisted. By the 4th day, Julian noticed something. He'd had the microcameras installed years ago, tiny, nearly invisible lenses hidden in light fixtures and door frames. It wasn't paranoia. It was a need for absolute control, for total information. That week, he opened the live camera feeds on his phone out of sheer curiosity, and what he saw made him pause. Elara had spread a simple quilt on the floor. Lily was sitting at the edge, rocking, staring at the polished concrete. Elara placed a small, simple hand mirror in front of the girl. Then she whispered, so softly the high-fidelity mic barely caught it, "Hello, beautiful girl. Look at that face. Look how brave she is." Lily didn't speak, but she didn't look away either. Elara continued her soft humming, never giving a command, never asking a question. She meticulously mirrored Lily's every movement, rocking when Lily rocked, humming when Lily hummed. She wasn't trying to pull Lily out of her world. She was stepping into it with her. Julian watched in silence. That night, he couldn't sleep. He left the camera feed open as he lay in his vast, minimalist bed. There was something strangely compelling, almost familiar, in Elara's movements. It reminded him, achingly, of his late wife. On the next day, everything changed. One afternoon, Elara brought in a small ceramic bowl filled with water. She gently dipped Lily's hand into it. To Julian's astonishment, watching from his phone, the child didn't pull back. Elara then began to tap lightly on the side of the bowl, creating a soft, gentle rhythm. "Raindrops, Lily," she whispered. "Raindrops talking to the flowers." And then, in a flicker so fast he almost missed it, Lily smiled. Julian froze, staring at his screen. He replayed the moments again and again. It was real. His daughter had smiled. And something deep inside him, a tightly wound coil of control, structure, and certainty, began to loosen. The next few days passed quietly inside the Vance estate, but for the first time, the silence felt different. It wasn't cold or heavy. It felt alive, pregnant with possibility. Julian stopped checking the stock market every hour. He spent less time on international calls, and more time watching the live feed from his daughter's room, staring at it like a man watching the sky, waiting for a miracle. Elara became a silent, steady presence in their lives. She moved through the house with a quiet grace. No heavy footsteps, no strong perfumes, no unnecessary words. But wherever she went, the energy of the room seemed to shift, becoming calmer, softer. She never asked Julian for updates or offered unsolicited advice. She never intruded. All her attention was for Lily. She was patient, constant, and unwavering. As Lily responded, her world began to open, not in grand gestures, but in tiny, subtle steps. One day, Elara rolled a small toy drum across the floor. Lily tapped it once, just once, but it was a connection. Another time, Elara quietly pointed to a purple wildflower in the garden. She said only one word, "Purple." Lily didn't respond then, but the next day, she had tied a purple ribbon into her own hair. It wasn't a magical cure, it was a presence steady, compassionate, and true. And for the first time, Julian understood just how powerful that could be. But not everyone was convinced. The night before Julian's annual tech charity gala, a lavish affair attended by industry leaders, venture capitalists, and politicians, his sister Victoria arrived early to help with preparations. As she walked through the hall, reviewing her notes, she stopped near the grand staircase. She saw Elara gently leading Lily out onto the terrace. "You trust her so quickly," Victoria said, staring ahead. "She's not a threat," Julian answered calmly. "How can you be so sure?" Victoria countered. "There are whispers." Julian turned to her. "What whispers?" "They say she worked for a family in Kentucky before this. Their son disappeared. No evidence, no charges. But the boy was never found. Elara was his caregiver." Julian's body went rigid. He glanced at his phone, at the live feed. Elara and Lily were sitting together, humming softly. He hated gossip. He hated how it poisoned things. But this wasn't just an employee. This was his daughter. Still, he said nothing. He just nodded and moved on. That night, as the mansion filled with music, laughter, and shimmering lights, Elara stayed upstairs with Lily. Julian found himself repeatedly glancing at the ceiling, wondering what was happening above. Finally, he excused himself from the party early. He went quietly to his private study, where the monitors glowed softly. On the screen, Elara and Lily were sitting together in front of a whiteboard, drawing. They were drawing faces, shapes. Lily's hand trembled as she held the marker, but she wasn't resisting. When Elara gently placed her hand over Lily's to guide the marker, the child didn't pull away. And then something happened that Julian couldn't explain. Lily looked up at Elara. Her lips moved. "Ma." Julian's heart nearly stopped. He leaned closer, pressing his face to the screen in disbelief. Lily had spoken. She had called her Ma. Elara showed no surprise. She just smiled, a soft, radiant smile, and whispered, "I'm here, my little flower." Tears welled in Julian's eyes. It had been over 2 years since he'd heard his daughter's voice. He stood there, trembling, wanting to run to the room and hold his child, but he stayed put. He understood, somehow, that this moment wasn't his to interrupt. It had to unfold on its own terms. But the next morning, something he hadn't expected happened. As he was preparing for his first meeting, his head of security, Donovan, entered the room, his expression hesitant. "Sir," he said, "we were reviewing the footage from the past week, as you ordered." "And?" Julian asked. "There's something you need to see." He pulled up a video clip. The timestamp read 5 days ago, 3 a.m. Location, hallway, outside Lily's room. In the grainy, low-light footage, Elara was walking barefoot, holding a piece of cloth. She went out toward the gardens. A few minutes later, she returned and stopped abruptly. She looked directly into the camera. It wasn't accidental. It was a direct, emotionless stare. Then, she held up the cloth, and in the dim light, it appeared to have a dark, red stain on it. Julian's breath caught. "Is that blood?" he asked. "We can't be sure, sir," Donovan replied. "Could be paint, juice, anything. We're bringing it to your attention because you needed to know." Section. Julian dismissed him with a wave of his hand, but he didn't return to his desk. His heart was pounding. His mind was a storm he couldn't contain. Why was Elara outside at 3 a.m.? Why did she look directly at the camera? And what was on that red-stained cloth? Doubt had entered Julian Vance's home, and it was not a guest that left easily. He barely slept that night, his thoughts a relentless cycle. One moment, he would remember the warmth in Elara's voice, Lily's utterance of "Ma" after years of silence. The next, he would see the image of a barefoot woman walking through his private gardens in the dead of night, holding something red, staring directly into a hidden camera. None of it made sense. Julian sat alone in his study, the soft glow of the monitors illuminating his face. One monitor showed Lily's room, now empty and dimly lit by a blue nightlight. Other screens played the clips Donovan had flagged. Moments of Elara alone in the hallways. Times she slipped out into the garden after midnight. Instances where she would pause and seem to look directly at a lens. Was she sending a message? Or was he losing his mind? By 7 a.m., he had made a decision. "Get her," he ordered his chief of staff. "I want to speak with her, alone." When Elara entered, her hands were clasped in front of her. Her simple dress was a soft cream color. There was no fear on her face, just a calm, unreadable serenity. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Vance," she said softly. Julian didn't stand. He didn't offer her a seat. "I've been watching the cameras," he stated flatly. "I know," Elara answered. The quiet affirmation of it threw him. His brow furrowed. "You knew you were being recorded." She nodded. "Of course. And you looked right at them, as if you were hiding something." She didn't flinch. "Or perhaps I wanted you to see." 7. "See what?" Julian demanded, his voice hardening. He slowly rose to his feet. "Explain why you were in my garden at 3 a.m. holding a cloth that looked like it was stained with blood." Elara took a deep breath, a mixture of a sigh and a faint, sad laugh. She calmly reached into her canvas bag and produced the very cloth in question. She laid it on his desk. It was a child's handkerchief. Red, yes, but embroidered with yellow sunflowers. The cloth was small, well-used, and frayed at the edges. "I found it near the fountain," she said. "Lily must have thrown it from her window. She was crying the next morning but couldn't explain why, so I went to retrieve it before sunrise." She looked Julian directly in the eye. "And I looked at the camera because I knew you were watching. I wanted to show you what real care looks like. It's not about observation, it's about anticipation." Julian stared at the handkerchief, feeling the heat of shame creep up his neck, but he wasn't finished. "You worked for a family in Kentucky," Julian said softly. "A child went missing. Your name was mentioned." Elara's jaw tightened, just for a fraction of a second. "Yes," she replied. His name was Noah. He was 6. He had epilepsy. During a seizure, he ran into the woods. I was the one who found his body. 2 days later." She paused. But no one ever remembers that part of the story. Julian's chest tightened. "Why didn't you tell me any of this? Would you have hired me if I had?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Julian had no answer. "I'm not a miracle worker," she said again, almost a whisper. "I'm just a person who listens. And sometimes that's all a child really needs. Not more therapy, not more silence." For the first time in years, Julian Vance was completely disarmed. The walls he had built around himself crumbled. He sank slowly back into his chair. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he said, his voice ragged. Elara nodded. "Believe your daughter. She's the one who is changing." And, as if the universe were listening, Lily suddenly appeared in the doorway. She wasn't crying, she wasn't rocking, she just stood there, barefoot, and slowly placed her hand in Elara's. Julian remained frozen. His daughter had never approached anyone willingly. She had never entered a room without fear. Now, she was calm, steady. Elara smiled down at the child. "Ready for the garden, little flower?" Lily nodded once, and together they walked out of the room. Julian remained in the silence. His heart was hammering, not with fear, but with something far more dangerous, hope. But that fragile hope was about to be tested, because someone else had been watching the footage. And, unlike Julian, she was not so forgiving. As the sun set over the California hills, Julian stood on his terrace, nursing a coffee, trying to shake off the tension of the day. Suddenly, his phone rang, an unfamiliar number. The area code was for Kentucky. Julian hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Vance?" a man's voice asked. It was gentle, with a soft southern accent, but measured. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Dr. Marcus Thorne," the man said. "I was the director of the community center where Elara used to volunteer. I understand she's in your employ now." Julian straightened, his heart rate quickening. "I've looked into her past," he answered carefully. "I know," Dr. Thorne replied. "That's why I'm calling." There was a pause, long and heavy. "There's something you need to understand about Elara," he continued. "She's not who you think she is." Julian's grip tightened on the phone. "Then, explain." "She's not dangerous," Dr. Thorne said. "But she carries something with her that few people can bear. A grief. So old, so deep. She lost her own child, Mr. Vance, a daughter." The words landed like stones in Julian's chest. "When Noah, our patient, passed away under her care, it broke her," Dr. Thorne added. "Not because it was her fault, but because she saw her own child in him." Julian turned away from the valley view, now staring into nothing. Why wasn't any of this in her file? Because she never spoke of her daughter, not even to us. After Noah died, Elara disappeared for months. When she came back, she was different, quieter, but with the children, especially the non-verbal ones, she had this uncanny connection. It was like she could hear them when they weren't speaking. Julian stopped breathing. "Then why are you telling me this now?" "Because someone called me earlier today," the doctor said. "Someone from your household, asking questions, digging. I figured I should tell you the truth before someone else twisted it." "Sam." Julian slowly lowered the phone, his mind reeling. Someone was trying to take Elara down, from inside his own home. That evening, he summoned Donovan, his head of security. He was ex-military, perpetually calm and loyal, but Julian had long known that even the loyal can be manipulated. "Did you call Kentucky?" he asked directly. Donovan blinked. "No, sir. I only looked at public records, as instructed." Julian nodded, watching Donovan's movements. He wasn't lying, but something was still wrong. If not Donovan, then who? Late that night, when the estate was silent, Julian locked himself in his secret control room behind the library bookshelf. Before him were hours of security footage. Quiet hallways, nothing out of the ordinary. Until he saw it. His sister, Victoria. 2 nights ago, she had entered his private office alone, bypassed the security system, hacked into his archives. A cold dread settled in Julian's stomach. Why? He found Victoria in the grand hall the next morning, arranging flowers, acting every bit the part of the lady of the house. She smiled. "Good morning, brother. You accessed my records," he said coldly. Victoria's face barely twitched. "I was concerned," she replied. "You have a stranger living in this house, close to Lily. I have a right to ensure her safety." "You called Kentucky?" "I had to," she snapped, her composure cracking. "She was too perfect. I knew something was wrong. And I was right. She's hiding something. That kind of pain, it's dangerous." "No," Julian insisted, his voice rising. "You didn't do this for Lily. You did this because you can't stand not being in control." Victoria's gaze hardened. "And I'm the danger? That woman. Your daughter calls her Ma. She is replacing your wife, Julian." The words hit him like a physical blow. "She is helping Lily heal," he said, his anger barely contained. "And what happens when she leaves?" Victoria shot back. "What happens when Lily forgets who her real mother was?" Julian turned away, but inside him, a seed of doubt had been planted. That evening, as he watched Lily rest her head in Elara's lap while she hummed softly, the peace he had begun to feel started to tremble. The quiet that Elara brought now seemed fragile, perilous. What if Victoria was right? What if this was all just a beautiful illusion? 2 mornings later, before sunrise, Julian was jolted awake by the sound of urgent footsteps in the marble hallways. He sat up, heart pounding, a sense of profound dread washing over him. A knock, then Donovan entered without waiting for permission. "Sir," he said out of breath. "Something's happened." Julian was already on his feet. "What is it?" "It's Elara. She's in the library. The staff found her. She was holding something." Julian's blood ran cold. He followed Donovan through the still dark corridors. The mansion was silent, except for the warm glow spilling from the library. And there she was, Elara, barefoot, standing in the middle of the room, holding a silver box he hadn't seen in years. His late wife's memory box. It had been hidden away, sealed behind a secret panel in the bookshelf. No one was supposed to know it was there. "How did you find that?" Julian asked, his voice low and tense. Elara looked up, her expression calm. "I didn't," she answered softly. "Lily brought me here." "What?" Julian's brow furrowed. "Last night, she kept touching the wall next to the bookshelf," Elara explained. "She whispered, 'Mama, inside.' So I followed her. She knew." Julian's hands trembled slightly as he took the box from her. He opened it slowly. Inside were photographs, handwritten notes, and a small digital voice recorder his wife used to use by Lily's crib. Everything was intact, untouched, but none of it could explain how a stranger, this woman, had found something that even Julian's most trusted staff didn't know existed. "I want the truth," he said, his voice ragged. "No more quiet smiles, no more riddles. Who are you, really?" She didn't blink. "I have always been truthful with you. I don't perform miracles, but I listen. I see things others don't. Lily showed me where to go. I just followed." But Julian couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't take the risk, not when everything was so fragile. He summoned Victoria. She arrived in under 10 minutes, still in a bathrobe, a hint of triumph in her eyes. The storm she had summoned had finally broken. "She needs to leave," Victoria said, before Julian could even speak. Elara didn't argue. She turned toward the door without protest, without tears, without objection, just silence. But before she crossed the threshold, she stopped and looked back at Julian. "She needs safety," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Not fear. You will regret this." And then she was gone. 2 hours later, Lily woke up. The house felt different. She didn't smile. She didn't hum. She didn't ask to go to the garden. When Julian entered her room, Lily looked at him, a real, direct look, and whispered, "Ma?" Julian sat beside her, trying to comfort her, taking her small hand in his, but she gently pulled away. That night, the silence returned to the mansion, but it was no longer the gentle, healing quiet Elara had brought. It was sharp now, hollow, a silence that wore the mask of peace but was filled with despair. Over the next 3 days, Lily regressed completely. She stopped responding to music. She refused to eat. She wouldn't look at anyone. Then came the final straw. A new therapist from Germany tried to engage her with flashcards. Suddenly, she screamed. A loud, primal, agonizing scream that seemed to shatter the room and every last vestige of hope with it. She curled into a ball, rocking violently. Nothing could reach her. Not a toy, not a light, not even Julian's voice. That night, Julian returned to the control room. He rewatched the old footage, Elara with Lily, helping her feel things, water, colors, warmth, until he came to the moment Lily led Elara to the bookshelf. It wasn't an accident. She had tapped the wood 3 times in the exact spot where the secret panel was hidden. Lily knew, and somehow, Elara had known how to listen. Julian's hand shook as he picked up his phone. He dialed. It rang 4 times before she answered. "You were right," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I sent away the only person who ever truly saw her. Please, come back." There was a pause, and then Elara's voice, steady as ever. "She is not a problem to be solved, Julian. She is not broken. She just needs the truth." Julian answered quickly, fiercely. "Then help me give it to her." Another moment of silence. Then, softly, Elara said, "I'm at the gate." The sun had not yet risen when Julian heard the soft chime of the front gate opening. He was standing in the marble foyer, barefoot, wearing only a linen shirt and pants. His hair was a mess, his eyes were shadowed, but deep inside him, something was waking up. Elara entered quietly. No words were needed. Her presence was enough to fill the room. At the top of the stairs, Lily appeared. She was clutching her favorite sunflower-embroidered scarf tightly to her chest. The early morning light haloed her small figure, making her look like a painting. Elara looked up. Their eyes met. Then Lily came down the stairs, barefoot like her father, one deliberate step at a time. "Lily?" Julian whispered, but she didn't look at him. She walked straight to Elara and stopped. The entire house seemed to hold its breath. Then, Lily raised a hand and gently, so gently, laid it on Elara's cheek. It was a small gesture, trembling but intentional, soft and deeply familiar. And then she said a word no one had heard her say since she was a toddler. "Safe." It dropped into the silence like a stone in a still pond, and the ripples went straight to Julian's heart. Tears filled his eyes, unbidden, unstoppable, and for the first time, he didn't wipe them away. Julian Vance was not a man who cried in front of others. He had wept only once since his wife died, and it was in secret, behind drawn curtains, with a bottle of scotch in his hand. No one had ever seen him break. Until now, something inside him shattered. He sank to his knees, pulling his daughter into a fierce hug, pressing his forehead against hers. "I'm sorry," he whispered, over and over. "I'm so sorry, Lily." Elara knelt beside them, placing a gentle hand on Julian's back. "We move forward now," she said quietly. "No more looking back." The next day, Julian gathered the entire household staff in the main living area. He stood, resolute, by the marble fireplace. Elara stood calmly by his side, and Lily sat peacefully in her lap. Victoria stood off to the side, her expression unreadable. "I owe all of you an apology," Julian began. "I allowed suspicion to replace trust in this home. I doubted someone who only brought peace. From this day forward, Elara is not just Lily's caregiver. She is family." There was a silence, until one of the young housekeepers began to clap. Donovan followed, and soon the room was filled with applause. Even Victoria clapped, though her movements were slow, and her eyes still searched for something she couldn't find. That evening, Julian and Elara sat together in the garden. Lily was playing nearby, carefully stacking colored stones, humming a soft melody under her breath. "Why did you come back?" Julian asked. "I never really left," Elara answered with a small smile. "I was just waiting for you to open the door." He looked at the woman beside him. No diplomas, no prestige, no fancy titles, but she had done what the world's best experts could not. "You said you had a child once," he said softly. Elara nodded. "Her name was Anna. She was 3. A fever came on too fast. We couldn't get help in time. I couldn't save her, but I see her in every child who needs to be heard." Julian sat in silence, watching his daughter under the setting Sunday. The child was singing now. Not words, just a melody made of memory and hope. This wasn't just healing, it was something deeper. A rebirth. Later that night, something new happened. For the first time in 2 years, Lily came into his bedroom. She tugged on Julian's sleeve and held up her arms. He lifted her without a word, holding her small body against his chest, her heart beating fast against his. As he tucked her into bed, Elara stood in the doorway. "This isn't the end," she said. "There will still be hard days." But now she knows she's not alone, Julian said. And for the first time in years, he leaned down and kissed his daughter on the forehead. He looked up at Elara, standing in the doorway. "Thank you," he whispered, "for saving us." Elara smiled. "You saved yourself, Julian," she answered. "You just needed to remember what love looked like." And that night, Julian Vance did something he never thought he would do. He turned off the cameras. Because trust didn't need to be monitored. He had finally learned to feel it. The months that followed were filled not with silence, but with laughter. Lily's laughter, bright, sometimes halting, but real. She spoke in short phrases, sometimes only with her eyes, but Julian no longer needed long conversations. He just needed her presence. Elara stayed, not as staff, not as a caregiver, but as family. One evening, Julian came across an old camera he'd hidden behind a bookshelf. He held it for a long moment, then, quietly, he put it down. When he turned, he saw Lily, barefoot, running through the garden, chasing butterflies. She spun around, smiled, and shouted, "Daddy!" And that moment, though unrecorded, was etched onto his heart forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Like the video, and share it with someone who believes in second chances and the quiet, persistent power of love.